This video is sponsored by Squarespace. After the release of Deathloop, I was reminded of an event that took place several years ago. Another arcane title was about to release, this one called Prey. As is typical, review codes were sent out to press in the weeks leading up to the game's launch so that they could inform their audiences of the game's merit. And it was pretty good, even great according to some. But an evaluation of the game's overall quality isn't what we're here to discuss. Rather, I want to talk about what IGN did that caused the internet to devolve into pure madness. You see, one of IGN's reviewers, a man named Dan Stapleton, was tasked with reviewing the game on PC while the console ports were given to other reviewers. Put it simply, he enjoyed his time with Prey, but after about 34 hours, he encountered a game-breaking glitch which corrupted all of his save files.
All of that came to a screeching halt when, after 34 hours, my recent saves all became corrupted, and going back hours to one that worked soon ran into a wall of constant crashes while loading new zones.
Now this type of thing happened, so he did what any reviewer or critic would do in this situation. He reached out to his press contact and they provided him with a new save file and instructed him to perform a clean installation of the game among other attempted fixes. However, he encountered the same issue again, and after hours and hours of troubleshooting, concluded that this bug was simply too prevalent in the pre-launch version of the game, so much so that he couldn't even complete it. Furthermore, at the time, Bethesda Softworks, the game's publisher, said that they were quote-unquote hopeful that they'd have a fix soon, though they refused to give him a firm answer as to when this would actually come, if ever. Now this all makes sense, and I would say that he should definitely receive some credit for calling out the game for its shortcomings. After all, if a bug that prevents you from completing the game doesn't qualify as something worth noting in a review, I don't know what would. But IGN's editors decided to do something novel.
I just had an idea.
You see, they still asked him to put a rating on the game, because you can't possibly reach launch day without a number slapped on the box. So he did, giving it a 4 out of 10, saying that he liked a lot of what they were doing here, but that the game was so broken for him on PC that he couldn't finish it. Needless to say, the internet and arcane fanboys went wild. As all of the reviews for the game started to pour in, one thing was very clear. Those who finished the game really enjoyed it, and it was receiving 8s, 9s, and even a few scant 10s. The evaluation was unanimous. The game was really good. And the common thread between all of these reviews is that while bugs were acknowledged, especially in PC reviews, where most of the issues seem to be present, these issues didn't actively detract from the scores, at least not significantly. This made IGN's PC review of Prey stick out like a sore thumb, and soon gamers from all over the world were letting them know. The YouTube video of the review was downvoted into oblivion. Mr. Stapleton, the reviewer, faced untold multitudes of tweets and DMs criticizing his work, and the internet came together to agree that IGN had once again put out a terrible review. But let's take a moment and try to look at this situation objectively. The crime that had allegedly been committed was that a reviewer had given a game a very poor score as a result of it being broken upon his testing. His rating was a reflection of his experience, and his experience was a bad one. He enjoyed most of the parts of the game that he played, which is why he still gave it a 4 instead of a 1. But the review was meant to be a reflection of his time with it, as all reviews are intended to be, at least according to any definition I've ever come across. Some said that he shouldn't have given it a 4 out of 10 because Bethesda Softworks, the game's publisher, assured him that they were working on a fix, and such a bad review in light of the incoming fix wasn't fair. But I don't think that this protestation is fair. You see, reviewers' jobs are to evaluate a product, specifically the one that's before them. You don't get to assume that the issue you've encountered will be fixed by launch day. Sure, you can ask the publisher if it will be, and it's up to the individual reviewer's discretion as to whether or not they trust the answer they get back. If we flash back to the release of Cyberpunk 2077, all of us reviewers were assured that major bug fixes would be implemented with the day one patch on launch day. And some reviewers did take CDPR at their word, believing that the team that made The Witcher 3 wouldn't dare lie to them. And as a result, their reviews looked pretty ridiculous on launch day. Others blindly ignored the bugs and confidently declared the game a masterpiece.
It's surreal that the game's finally here, that I've played it, that I've rolled credits on it. And let me tell you, the substance of the game blew me away, lived up to my hype. I am in love with what I experienced. This has lived up to be sort of a game of my dreams as a Cyberpunk fanatic.
Only to change their tune upon the game's launch, and in some cases even deleting their prior videos on the game to try and wipe the slate clean. No, I'm not joking. He actually did that. The point is, there's never a clear way of determining whether or not you can trust what is said to you, which is why it's usually safer to just go off of the product that you have actually received. But all of this begs the central question at the heart of this debate. Was this fair? And it's a very good question, and I'll answer it in just a moment. But first, thank you to our sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the online website hosting and creation service used by individuals and professionals alike. I actually use Squarespace to host my websites lukestevens.net and websites from my startup companies like rhapsodystream.com. So this is one of those rare occasions where a YouTuber is recommending something that they actually use every single day and have been for years. So whether you're looking to create a portfolio online, start an online store, or anything else, Squarespace is a great option. Check them out today at squarespace.com/LukeStevens and make sure to use promo code LukeStevens at checkout for 10% off of your first purchase. Now, was this 4 out of 10 ranking fair? Well, I'll be the first to come out and say that I think it was. If anything, giving it a 4 when the product was broken was overly generous. And considering that the review was amended after the bug was patched about a week after launch, there really was no long-term damage done. The point is that it simply didn't work on PC for this reviewer, and many other PC players on launch day, might I add. And so, in evaluating the game that he was provided, Dan gave the game a rating that reflected his experience, and it's as simple as that. And I think that sounds pretty reasonable. But then why were people so upset? Well, we could refer to the stereotypical neckbeard gamer who simply wants to rage in opposition to someone who doesn't like the same thing they like, but I think that would be low-hanging fruit and, in effect, a straw man. I actually think that the real explanation is more complicated and also more interesting. You see, on the one hand, I think it's true that for many people, the 4 out of 10 rating was perceived as an attack and even an insult levied against one of their favorite developers. Furthermore, these same people felt that this rating was unfair because one reviewer having a bad experience with the game isn't indicative of the title's quality across the board, which is certainly true. But you also have to remember that one reviewer cannot possibly take into consideration the experience of literally everyone else on the planet when reviewing a game prior to launch. Put yourself in our shoes for a moment. Remember, when we lucky few who are given review copies are working on our write-ups before the embargo lifts, we are doing so completely in the dark. We don't know if other reviewers are going to give this game a 10 or a 9 or a 4. We are entirely isolated, which is the way it should be. But the point is, he couldn't go and ask people at GameSpot or other YouTubers and read up on what they thought of the game and whether or not they considered one game-breaking bug on his run to be worthy of heavy penalization of its final review score. Or at the very least, reviewers aren't supposed to do that, though I'm sure that some people send Twitter DMs to other personalities online to find out what they think of a game. But the point is, we're back to square one. One can only review a game based on what their experience with it is. And in this situation, the game hadn't launched yet, and so the only thing Dan could possibly know about it was that he wasn't able to finish the game because it was so broken. On the other hand, some felt as though the issues that Dan was encountering were a result of his own technical difficulties, and so holding the game responsible wasn't rational. And to this day, you can still see plethora of comments, even from large YouTubers, making this very point, such as this one from Joseph Anderson, who I know a lot of my audience follows, where he's arguing that it doesn't seem as though Dan verified that these bugs were a result of something Arcane did wrong, meaning that it could have been an issue with one of his storage drives, the hard drive where he stored the game on, or some sort of driver incompatibility, or something of the sort. And I will say that I think this is a fair question to ask. Blaming a game for hardware malfunctions would be akin to criticizing the construction of your new Tesla because you drove it off a bridge. But what we do know is that Dan was in active communication with the support staff at Bethesda Softworks and in turn Arcane, so much so that they were even providing him replacement save files so that he could continue his run through the campaign. So I would say that if this were an issue with the hardware, short of something incredibly severe, which would likely be present in other games as well, the IT staff that was helping him would probably have picked up on it. And if you were to say that it could have been driver issues, I would simply point out that if there were in fact driver incompatibilities with the game's software and graphics hardware, the onus would be on Bethesda to provide a beta driver to allow reviewers to experience the game properly. And this is actually a very common thing. In fact, one of the reviews I did very recently required installation of a beta driver if you happen to be running an AMD graphics card to maximize performance. And lastly, I would point out that this was a bug that they were able to fix within a week of the game's launch. If this actually was an issue with faulty hardware, like a hard drive or something of the sort, not only would it have been relegated to just Dan's playthrough, which it wasn't. In fact, one of my college buddies ran into this exact same issue on launch day, but it also wouldn't have been easily patched with a 50 megabyte update. But at the time that these comments were made and that the review dropped, nobody knew if this issue was widespread or if it was Dan's doing. Yet, even so, countless YouTubers and gamers took to the comment section to let IGN know that they were probably the problem, and so criticizing the game wasn't fair. But I think the other element to this whole debacle that must be addressed is just how much this review stood out against the pack. Almost no one else brought up major technical issues in their reviews. Most of the people who played the game on PC did reference bugs and glitches. The key difference was that they, for one, didn't seem to encounter this game-breaking bug, and secondly, they didn't think it was fair to heavily penalize the game as a result of the bugs that they did encounter. And as a result of this difference in experience and review methodology, IGN looked as though they were simply trying to drive clicks by way of controversy, when in reality, their reviewer was simply presenting a rating that was honestly reflective of his time with the game. And maybe I'm a hard ass, but I think games should be penalized for bugs, performance issues, and certainly problems that prevent you from playing the game outright, whether it be crashes, soft locks, or save file corruptions. And this is why I penalized Far Cry 6 when I reviewed it recently, and why I considered Man of Medan to be one of the worst games I've ever paid money for. It's also the reason why I made a 5-hour critique going through the entirety of Cyberpunk 2077. And this is where it's all simply a matter of your perspective and opinion. Some think it's not relevant to dwell on bugs and glitches like these. If the game doesn't work on your system, it's just not for you. Or calling out all of the issues in Cyberpunk 2077, while an accurate description of the game's state will lead countless people into a position where they will refuse to play the game, potentially leading them to miss out on a remarkable, though buggy, experience. It really is just a matter of your personal tolerance for bugs and lack of polish. After all, for over a decade, people made excuses for Bethesda Game Studios titles and all of the bugs that came along with them. But in 2015, the gaming community decided that they had had enough and that they were going to demand better, and that studios shouldn't be able to release broken games that require mods to become playable. And some hold to this new doctrine, while others hold to the old. But all of this brings us to the present day implication of this debacle. As a result of IGN going rogue with this review, nowadays we don't see major publications taking quite as strong a stand as this, which I think is often necessary. Take Deathloop, for example, another game from Arcane, the game that triggered my memory of this event and inspired me to make this video. This title had a lot of issues at launch. I and many others online encountered numerous bugs, including one which broke the menus and forced you to close the entire game and restart it, loading into a save file at the start of the day, losing out on potentially 30 to 45 minutes of progress. And I, for one, ran into this multiple times, and it was infuriating every single time. This bug didn't prevent me from progressing through the story, but it did heavily encumber my journey to the end credits, and I would consider it a major bug, one that forces the game to close and results in the player losing hours of progress over the course of their run. And I think in these cases, it's fair to heavily penalize the game when it launches with such an issue. After all, if we were reviewing a car that randomly stalled out and forced you to pull over and restart the engine to continue, only to break down a few hours later until a post-purchase patch was sent out, we would rightly be infuriated that the manufacturer considered this acceptable. Simply, we are evaluating a product which was given to us broken with the promise of future repairs. It doesn't matter if it's Bethesda Game Studios doing it, Arcane, CD Projekt Red, or a car manufacturer. It is unethical, unacceptable, and should be called out when it occurs. If reviewers don't vocalize disdain for such actions, then the publishers and developers will just continue to do it, and likely will become more bold as time goes by, something we saw clearly with Bethesda Game Studios releases from the 360 and PS3 era leading into the PS4 and Xbox One generation. If you don't punish the developer and publishers of these games for putting out rushed, poorly put together games, they will keep doing it. Playing nice and declining to call out major bugs and issues in games for sake of avoiding online outrage may make practical sense on the part of editors and reviewers who want to avoid the Twitter hate storm, but it doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help the consumer who might waste their money on a game that's broken when they purchase it, and it certainly isn't the honest thing to do. Sure, we could say that gamers shouldn't be so outraged at reviews of games they enjoy that come to opposite conclusions, but that's a much bigger fish to fry. The point is, reviewers should have the balls to call out studios that try to release games with major issues, regardless of how beloved the studio is, how successful their games have been in the past, and how irrationally sycophantic their fans may be. So, even if you were someone who thought that IGN's review of Prey on PC back in the day was just another example of them being ridiculous, hopefully now you can look back and appreciate it for what it was. Someone taking a stand, calling out a developer and publisher for sending out a broken game for review, and refusing to bow to the hate mob that was inevitably going to follow.